We're at the beginning of a journey here in K-12 education, and seeing the states, some of you are in states that are in the senior class. Some of these goals got put forth in 2013, and we're almost in 2017. So we're at a state that's at the other end, and we're kind of can be a little scary starting a big change process. So the why of this change, and if you're working with K-12 systems, it's really good to understand this, that if you look at in Lincoln Public Schools, we're 60 schools, 40,000 students. We have 157 that showed up to the 612 science training this fall as my closest number. So lots of teachers, lots of schools. How do we get basically an aircraft carrier turned in a different direction is my goal, working with all schools. So we're at current Lincoln Public Schools standards. We've seen that thrown around today, these educational priorities. Where did it come from? So if you work backwards, in 2010, the taxpayers of Nebraska, who pay all of us, they've set forth these goals and said, we think students should know these things. And they've got the list, and our teachers work from that. As a local school district, we exceed that and create local exceeding those standards, but we have to at least get those state standards in. So that's got the control piece. But you can go back further from that. Where does that come from? Does it just get pulled out of thin air? No, it's based on a lot of documents. You have to go quite a ways back. And I just watched the National Science Teacher Association president talk about this yesterday. He was at our state science conference. That think about 1995. We had a library was a physical place with books on shelves. Now it's on a thumb drive. Kids played outside in 1995, and now there's a lot of video games keeping them inside. The way cell phones have changed. So not to downplay, how many years have gone by of what current LPS is based on? And then the question, have we learned anything in those 21 years about how the brain works, what kids are able to do internationally on tests, and how does that feedback? Yes, we have. So in 2017, September 2017, I'd like to say it's game on with this race, because we're going to get our new set of Nebraska standards, which will pull into our district and all districts in Nebraska. And has there been learning in this last 21 years? So over about a decade, in 2011, they put together the framework for K-12 science education. And we're not going to spend time diving into these, but there's apps. It's all free online because the National Research Council through National Academies Press puts them out. So you can go through and dig into these. I really like the NGSS app if you want a quick way to start looking at it. But this kind of collection of what we've learned about how students learn was then packaged into standards in the form of next generation science standards. And again, states have that choice. 17 states, some of them I saw highlighted from people who are here today. So 35% of states have adopted these as their state standards. That's 1 in 2 children population-wise. So my question as district science curriculum specialist, are our kids getting what the rest of the country getting? And I need to make sure we are. And I think something I'll underline a few times, when you dig into these standards, you'll see it's making students into thinkers, which I think we can all agree with changes in the skill base that's out there. Even if they're not going to college, we're working on getting them to be thinkers. So as a local district, trying to get this ship turned in that direction, I'm using local control this year, and we'll talk about that, as I'm putting these out ahead of what's coming. So I try to explain this, to teachers. Some are early adopters, and they're very excited, like me. I have a bias for them. Others are obstructionists. They see it as a lot of work. They didn't learn this way, and we're going to talk about some of those shifts briefly. And it's threatening to their system. And so I've got both ends of the spectrum, but I try to say, I'm just the messenger, and I'm trying to get out ahead of this wave of all these things that we get to, depending on how you look at it, or have to learn. Or you can look at it this way. Again, there's my bias. It's more of a sunny day for science. If you've worked in a lab, which I have a master's in biology, it's much more authentic to how science works. So what is so new about this? Three-dimensional teaching and learning is something you'll hear about. And I use this analogy a lot. I'm in my senior year of being outside the classroom, 4th year of not being in the classroom. I've learned this stuff at all levels. So I feel like teachers may see a lot of information and trying to drink from the fire hose is how it might feel at times. I really like this as one way to summarize it. National Research Council put this out in 2015, Guide to Implementing NGSS, those standards. On the left, I think a lot of us could relate to this. And really something to keep in mind, this is 5% of all students that learn best this way. So when you see one of these points as science for all, we're trying to expand past this column on the left. So the rote memorization, learning ideas disconnected from questions about phenomena. So we're studying cells because cells is the title of the chapter. Trying to get away from that. Teachers providing information, teachers posing questions with only one right answer. And if you highlight, you can see what it's shifting to. It's terminology as needed, systems thinking, so maybe instead of cells being the title of the chapter, your cuts heal because cells repair. And that's our phenomena, and now we're going to learn the content related to that. So trying to think about things that tie it together. Students conducting investigations, solving problems, students discussing open-ended things that don't have one easy right answer. And continuing along on those indicators, again, shifting from the textbook being all the knowledge, now we have Dr. Google. It's considered a valid source to start from. There's a lot less, the knowledge is being controlled by a textbook. The pre-planned cookbook labs into taking that same lab about measuring plant growth, but giving kids, instead of the instructions, give them the tools and have them argue from evidence with their peers how we're best measuring this plant growth and convince a peer. From using worksheets to students producing, from oversimplifying, and again back to that 5% that learn best of what's on the left and then do well and come back and kind of replicate that traditional academic script. Teaching for all students, really opening it up for all. Digging a little deeper on the 3D, we have disciplinary core ideas. There's plenty of that in our current Nebraska standards. That's the content. That's not going away. We also have inquiry, which is not going away. So if you've heard that in Tiffany's opening, breathe a sigh of relief. It's still there, but we're defining it as practices. So we have these 8 practices. How will they do inquiry? Are they arguing from evidence? Are they modeling? Are they using computational mathematical thinking? So just being more specific. And then adding a third piece, cross-cutting concepts, which most of us take for granted. Energy, systems, size, scale, proportion, those kind of things. They've been there since 1995, but those blue and black strands a lot of times got ignored. And if we weave those together throughout the year, you're not just teaching scientific method the first week and then moving to the content. You're weaving it in through the standards. Hopefully you get a more strong understanding. So any one of those strands alone is kind of fragile, but you weave it together, you get that stronger understanding. And I wish I had the student evidence. There's some preliminary things that are very exciting, but because this is only in its 4th year, as national standards and states are still in their cycles pulling it in, we don't have those great pictures and stories that Tiffany has. But hopefully in basing it on current educational research, we'll get there, and you'll start to see that. Even more concrete, here's some standards for my district on the left, which are very similar to our state standards. Here's a standard on the right from Next Generation that kind of pulls that together and comparing those. So the top one, physical chemical change, very content-based. The bottom one, using inquiry, very practice-based. But the two are kind of disconnected. If you look on the right, analyze and interpret data. There's a practice on the properties of substances. So you're pulling the two together. If you kind of highlight the colors on these, the content is orange. The practice is now woven in with the content. And you've got also a cross-cutting concept in the standard. It's implicit. You don't see the word patterns, but that's the cross-cutting concepts. And teachers are going to be also teaching those explicitly instead of just assuming kids will pick that up. There's these weird color things that happen. Okay, and then just kind of to recap, you have students doing something to show you what they know, what it's connected to. That's 3D. And that's the point of all this. It took me a few years to get there because I was excited. This is reinvigorating me to want to teach. But the point is 3D teaching we know works, and then developing a policy that supports that. If you're teaching an elective that's not in those core classes, I hate to call it that, but biology, chemistry, physics, you can definitely write new standards this way. They don't have to come from a document. It's a thing that we found works really well. So where do we start? I like this triangle. I think National Research Council puts it out. But it's got the what of teaching. So the standards are now very well done. They're a national document. If we end up with that in Nebraska, some of your states have that. We have assessment. You have to assess in your classroom to know where kids are at, to move on or not, or to reteach. You have external assessments, like our state science test, or in a district our size, I do internal assessments to the classroom, but internal to our district. So I know what materials to buy, what professional learning needs are out there. All of these things can take a life of their own, and I found in a couple years of tinkering not the best leadership strategy. That doesn't move us forward fast enough. Teachers want to know, how do we teach this? So we're focusing in my district in curriculum and instruction. We found some tools out there that there's thousands of them already, and they get very technical. This one seems to resonate with me, so we're starting with this, but you can work outside of this tool. Storylines. Teachers coming together, brainstorming phenomena, and then putting them in a logical sequential order. So after teaching a lesson, instead of thinking, were kids engaged because of how I presented information, you start questioning, did I pick the right phenomena? And it doesn't have to be phenomenal. It can be water beads on the outside of a glass. So it's kind of just things that have been there all along. It can be very affirming for some teachers, but it's trying to be a little more intentional and focused about that planning. And then obviously our goal. Hopefully, this was a real outcome, so I said no students' outcomes yet, but this was in a 5th grade classroom. We switched to using roller coasters as the phenomenon to teach scientific investigations. And you can see high engagement there. This was all over the room. Students owning that lesson in 5th grade already. So kind of my playbook, and again, thinking about what districts are going through, this might help you connect when you approach a district, or if you're a teacher in a district, ideas to put out there. We have 11 middle schools. This is one example. I'm also doing this in high schools. How do we get there by this little spot down here? This is when the state will see this result. In Lincoln is a town that actually publishes our test results in a newspaper. This doesn't happen in all towns in Nebraska, but we will get put in the newspaper for this. And there's going to be a state test that'll come along by 2020 that reflects this new type of standard. Now, how well they can do that on a broad scale on a test could be a challenge, but technically that's what should be there. So if I work backwards, I find that all 6th graders have to start with these in 2017-18. And if I don't want all, which is 3,000 kids the first year, which is hard for me to get out and provide that just-in-time support to, I've got a smaller group out front. So 2 middle schools are very brave, and they're forging ahead, and their principals have signed on for this, knowing that it could cost them staff that might get frustrated because you kind of get your butt kicked at first. But 2 6th grade across the district are using these now, and I'm able to bring them to national meetings and be meeting with them multiple times a week and really be down in the trenches to make this a bottom-up process, not just top-down. So we're learning a lot from this group, and they seem happy. So teacher results, they're finding things exceeding their expectations on how kids are responding beyond what they thought kids might be able to do and their preconceived notions of what they've done in the past. So that's where we're at. Hopefully, I can stay there through this. It's always a little scary putting it out there, but seeing principals step forward and teachers say they are liking this makes me feel some promise of moving forward. I will say how it feels. If you played Chutes and Ladders lately, sometimes it's like, oh man, we got a national meeting coming right here to Lincoln, and great tools teachers can use, and we're going to be able to do this. And then you get it day before the first day of school, and you're sitting there thinking, what the heck did we get ourselves into? And then a couple days later, you hear good stories back. So there's definitely this back and forth, but kind of all states are joining hands, is what it feels like in some ways, and walking forward together. And we definitely want our students in Lincoln, Nebraska to have what the rest of the country is getting. And one thing, I saw my 2-minute warning, if you look at some of the practices, if you just go to modeling alone, look at the continuum. They've broken that up K-12. Modeling, I would say in LPS that we're doing right now is in high school is about what 3 through 5 would be in the practices. If you look at the 12th grade modeling, they're saying students can program a computer software program to manipulate variables to see an effect. And so if we think about that as our 12th grade outcome, we're going to have a new generation of thinkers, not just following the recipe. So hopefully you'll see this bubble move through. Questions? I think maybe 1 minute.
Yep, got one.